people won't remember you for the cool things that you did, but they will remember how you treated them, for better or for worse. So I didn't make that up, stole it obviously from somebody else, but I think having that compassion in those interactions with folks, just as a general rule, they're going to remember that. And I don't know if you can make somebody feel good by caring about them, by giving a crap, they may remember it down the road.
Hello, and welcome to the new Mission Career Transition Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Caprellian, and I'm joined by my co-host, sister, and talent management pro, Alexandra Caprellian. We interview service members that transition to new careers, DoD representatives, and civilian HR professionals to provide you with lessons learned you won't get in a transition class and to help you transition with confidence. Are you in a place in your career where you're like, I can't really excel here, but if I was in that last job that I had or this other job, this other duty assignment, I know I could crush it because I've got all the right qualities, education, and experience to just excel in there. But you're not there. And you know it's your time to get out. And you know that if you could find a place where it was attuned to the skills and the education and the training and the experience that you had, you could go out there and you could deliver quality results that would be appreciated and recognized. If that's what you're thinking about, believe it or not, you may be suited for contracting work after your military career. And that's what we're going to talk about with Sheridan Conklin, a prior Marine who retired and went into the contracting world. He's going to talk about what that world is like and the benefits of that world. So stay tuned. Sheridan Conklin, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
We're finally going to delve into a topic we haven't touched on, and it's contracting. I think a lot of folks, particularly those that are putting in a significant amount of time in their military service, getting out, at retirement eligibility, they understand what the GS employment opportunities are, but they also will encounter opportunities to go into the contracting realm. I wanted to say military contracting, but I think there's a good reason to just keep it a little bit vanilla and call it contracting. So Sheridan, not only good talking to you again, we've worked together before, but also to give us some insight on that whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to start off, I just want to give the listeners an understanding of who you are and where you came from. Can you give us an idea of where you grew up and how you joined the military?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in California, my brother and I and my mom, older brother by 3 years. And I joined the Marine Corps shortly after turning 17. I hit the delayed entry program, and my brother was going to college. He had some pretty big aspirations on the education front, but I convinced him to drop out and join the Marine Corps with me on the buddy program.
Nice.
So, so we went in together, same platoon in boot camp, SOI, and then we both got selected for anti-tank assaultmen. So we went to assaultman school and then security force school, and then our first duty station together. So yeah, it was a really good time, jumping in with both feet with, somebody that's got your back, your brother whom you're very close with. So yeah, that was really the start of it.
All right, great. And so where did you go from there? And if you could just give us an overview of your military experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did one deployment there, 2001, in Afghanistan. But yeah, after that 4 years, I got out. My brother stayed in, and I went back home to California and helped my dad manage his custom hot rod shop in Southern California. And after a few months, I was like, man, I really missed being in the service. I think I want to go back in, but I want education. And Marine Corps in the late 90s wasn't super encouraging about school, so I went in the Air Force, did security force over there, is basically, for those that don't know, it's like MP mixed with air base ground defense. And did that, deployed a couple of times, got my degree, and then I was at a crossroad. Which service do I want to get commissioned through, the Marines or the Air Force? And I was split pretty 50-50 on it, but lean towards the Marine Corps. I thought that would be a little more gratifying to look back on when I was a bit older. So linked up with my brother again at the basic school as he was going through the warrant officer program. And I became a combat engineer out of TBS. And I had a very good path. I was fortunate enough to have some platoon commander time, XO time, company commander, and operations officer, and doing some planning. So I got the full gamut. I would write it the same way if I could. And it was a very, very good experience. Few more deployments later, and 23 years, and I hung it up.
We were both in 2nd Marine Aircraft Wing, and that was your last duty station, wasn't it? In MCAS Cherry Point.
Correct. Yep.
All right. Well, it's a great overview. So let's just get into the business here of transition. When did you decide to depart military service, and why? Like, what was your thought process?
Yeah, it's such a great question. You always hear people say, like, when you know, you know. And for me, it built up a little while. As far as timeline, right around 2018, there was a time, mostly when I was younger, that I would look at senior folks. I would look at sergeants major. I would look at full bird colonels, and I just couldn't even imagine doing the things they did, and they were just so in such a high regard of performance and everything. But as I spent more time in and working closely with some of these folks, the allure changed a little bit, and I felt like the rank structure was prohibitive for performance and capability and growth. And I don't mean that in any bad way at all. It just, to me, I'd look at CG or whomever, and they weren't doing anything that I feel I couldn't do. And so I kind of just wanted opportunity, and I found that outside the Marine Corps.
Yeah, I think that's something that people don't talk about, but I mean, we talk about it, but we usually talk about it later in our career, where sometimes the rank is a limiting thing, right? And that's largely a byproduct of the military needing to promote or have individuals leave the service because we got to keep a relatively young and physically capable force. But the second and third order effects of that are, it doesn't matter like how high of a performer you are, you're really probably not going to get promoted ahead of peers, and you got to wait for your number to come up.
Exactly.
Yeah. And like I said, the whole process has its benefits and drawbacks, but that's a great observation. When you knew that you were going to transition, what actions did you take?
Yeah, the first thought, and I had this thought for a while, is what am I going to do when I grow up, right? Like, all right, I was infantry. I'm not going to do that in the civilian world. I did some MP stuff, which is, great, love it, awesome job, but that doesn't really transfer, and I didn't really want to be a cop. And then, combat engineering, right? Like, 17, 18 different MOSs, all these things, and you're not certified in anything. So, what do you do in the civilian world? What do a lot of engineers do is they look at like program management, maybe like operations or development type jobs. But yeah, I was really like scratching my head, what in the world am I going to do? Do I go back to school? Yeah. So a lot of those thoughts, and especially I used my GI Bill already. So I'm like, I gotta figure this out. And fortunately, opportunity fell in my lap. Yeah. While at Cherry Point, getting through the transition process, a friend of mine whom I worked with previously had an opportunity. Just networking. He approached me. He's like, "Hey, I know you're retiring. Are you interested in potentially doing some logistics?" Right? Which, of course, we always say, engineers and logistics, we get that sibling rivalry. And so years and years of me teasing my logistician friends, lo and behold, that's the route that I went when I retired. So, and I was fortunate on the transition because it was, when I was going through the latter part of the transition, which by the way, the transition it's always funny. I must say, when I say those words around like, my non-military friends are like, well, what kind of transition are you talking about? I don't understand this. I'm like, no, that's just retiring. And they're like, what do you mean you're retiring? Oh, you're not going to work again? You're so young. So yeah, just the kind of lingo is interesting. But yeah, the logistician opportunity was a remote work job on a team that was funded under Operation Warp Speed, and they were bringing medical infrastructure to the U.S. or growing existing medical infrastructure within the U.S. Just growing the capacity of it by size or volume. Or capability. And this was all in the screening and diagnostic side of COVID-19. So it was something that I was like, wow, this is fascinating. I'm interested in it. I'd love to help. I'd love to do my part. And the transition for me was super smooth because, 2020, we were already doing a bit of hybrid work. And so, going into a remote work job, it was a pretty smooth, transition for me.
I want to go back once though. I think you're being a little bit humble, or maybe we need to clarify something. You said that the opportunity fell in your lap. So if you really kind of reflect back on, well, what were the things that you had done leading up to that? Maybe even years ago, maybe it was setting up a profile or keeping in touch with friends or soliciting support. Were there some other things that you did that ended up providing you the into that company?
Yeah, that is a fair point. So the friend of mine, we both were operations folks together. So I was a squadron operations officer, and he was the assistant operations officer for the mag that I worked for. And so just having that connection on our weekly interactions and being acquaintances, he had a pretty good network being reserve, and I had a good network just with people I had worked with, but I didn't have it into any like digital space. And so that was a huge, huge eye opener for me is, as I reached out to the point of contact and their quality control and HR folks, start engaging with me. They're like, hey, I want to do an interview this afternoon. Where's your resume? What's your LinkedIn profile? And my head is spinning. I was like, oh no, I'm not ready. I'm not ready for this.
That's it. I mean, I think it brings up a really good point too. It's the relationships that you develop throughout your military service and the people that go before you into the civilian sector should probably be considered as a potential, somebody I at least have an informational interview with. But if you maintain contact with them and you end up being good at what you do and the type of person that people want to work with, that good karma seemed to have worked for you. It was good karma that had occurred and it worked for you. And that's kind of, along with the networking, how the opportunity landed.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And maybe it's just my own philosophy too, but obviously stolen from somewhere else. But people won't remember you for the cool things that you did, but they will remember how you treated them, for better or for worse. So I didn't make that up. Stole it obviously from somebody else, but I think having that compassion in those interactions with folks, just as a general rule, they're going to remember that. And I don't know if you can make somebody feel good by caring about them, by giving a crap, they may remember it down the road.
Yeah, it's all about impact, right? What kind of impact can you bring to people, and what can you change for them and give to them? And I think that's great.
You have an understanding of the contracting landscape. And so I know you left off talking about with the first company that you were with, but what were the things that you learned about the contracting landscape? And tell us a little bit about, what the work entailed and what that work culture was like, that cultural shift.
Yeah, absolutely. So the the contracting world was completely new to me. And so, what it means to like when we talk about a federal contract, learning the language, like what are base years, what are option years. If they say they've got a 5-year contract with a company for consulting or something like that, it may be a 1-year contract with 4 years as option. So 1 base, 4 option. That's your 5-year contract. Now, a lot of times they do that. It may be broken down in different years, but when the 1 year, whatever it is, expires, there is an opportunity for protest and recompete from other companies. So the contracting thing, if you had to sum it up, if I had to, compared to say civilian employee of the government, civilian employee of the government, you're getting, you're working towards a second retirement, a little bit lower paying, but more steady. Whereas the contracting side, you make more, but you don't get a retirement and you have less job security. And so I learned this because I was at the tail end of the contract when I went on board, and there were protests to the contract as it started getting going through the renewal or recompete. And so the 4-person team I was on of logisticians, we bounced back and forth over the period of about 9 months between 2 or 3 different companies. Because one would protest. As soon as they do a formal protest, you go into this like review period where you have to stay in the same company for a certain amount of months so the government can review the protest. And if they award it to another company, you've got to quickly like onboard to them, which comes through some hurdles. You have to go through all the HR, all the training for the company, which is almost or nearly identical to what you just did with the previous company. But there are also benefits too, because each time I kind of bounced back and forth, I learned a little bit more. And I learned like how do you market yourself? How to get over the awkward, discussion of talking about salary, things like that. So that helped me transitioning back and forth a few times. But the other part of your question is, what was it like? What was the interaction? For me in that position, like I said, 4-person team, the joint unit I was a part of had about 50 contracts to expand the medical infrastructure. And so out of those 50, we just divided them by the 4 of us, and we provided logistical support. And there were times it was very dynamic, where they'd say like, hey, Sheridan, we've got samples coming in from X country and we need, some clearance and permits, and, or this rail strike is happening and it's causing this huge backlog, or the ports or the Ever Given is stuck in the Suez Canal, or there's this major catastrophe, whatever it is that's going to cause it. I found over the time, I almost felt like I was just watching the news and subscribing to like logistics, newsletters to better forecast. But seeing how all that stuff's connected was very fascinating. And there was quite a big tie to what we did in the military when we, TOT, when we transport things, putting stuff on rail, being able to speak that language, that was very helpful. Yeah. Aside from, building your situation reports, weekly updates to your boss, my initial trepidation turned to confidence. As I hit about the year mark, I really did, appreciate that basic leadership, communication, being able to follow. Like when I first was on the team, I was I was basically like the low person on the totem pole of the team, and in fairly short order, there was an opportunity, and they offered it up to me, so I became the team lead. And yeah, the trepidation turned to confidence fairly quickly.
How long do you think that was from the time that you started to the time that you kind of felt like you were settled and you knew what you were doing?
I'm going to say right around the 6-month mark. And I think being curious by nature helped me out. So like with the company I worked for, there were non-paid additional, basically like collateral duties. And I volunteered for them because I wanted to see all aspects of what this corporate was. And so I became one of their auditors to do process auditing. And then I became their SME for logistics for interviews. And I just learned a ton. Like, it's funny when we've taught collateral duties in the military, it's a dirty word. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I got put on this other additional duty, and it's just not, it's not something you look forward to. But my perspective changed. And on the civilian side, I'm like, well, this is an opportunity to learn about the company and to show them that I care, you know?
Yeah. So you volunteered for duty. You volunteered
I
for
did.
duty, and
I did.
but there was probably more learning involved. No, that's great.
Yeah, it took me retiring to become a good Marine.
Oh, so what are you doing now? I mean, because I know that you were discussing about how there was, oh geez, I'm going to botch the word you used, a bidding war and then filing complaints, but then you ended up changing companies, right?
Yeah, correct. So, in fact, just this, well, this past August, during these protests, I worked for the company I'm now at for about a week before another protest and got pulled back to the company. But I went over full time in November, and I was doing the same job. So basically, the logistics team lead for this medical screening and diagnostics that transitioned, and I stayed the same company. So still a contractor. Just renegotiated my salary and worked for a new company. Now, this contract under Warp Speed was ending summertime. I had to basically find a new opportunity. At least I thought I did. With the previous company I worked for, they were very hands off with that, and as long as the customer was happy, they kind of stayed at bay. And so there wasn't a lot of involvement with the company. And so with all the protests and things, they look to rehome us basically. Now the new company, I thought that's just how old companies were at, but the new company, as I reached out to my supervisor and I'm like, hey, our contract is ending, sometime before the end of the fiscal year. Do I need to start looking for a new job? And they were like, no, don't worry. We know you're a contractor, but you're a part of our family, and we will find a new home for you. And so what this particular company does is, they have your resume on file, and they have talent management folks, and they even have monitors. They have folks that help your career path, and they advise you, and you meet with them, intermittently. But so in the springtime, I'm working through this process. And it always goes to show, like, answer your phone, be ready. You just never know what's going to happen. I got a call. I was actually in the Bahamas. I got a call and something told me to answer it. and I did, even though I was on vacation. And it was an opportunity within the same company. And it was their product lead that was essentially, screening some folks as they were looking to build out their team. And so I was like, hey, I am in the Bahamas, but I'm definitely glad to take this call. Is this important to me? It's important to maintain some job security. But yeah, in short order after coming back from that trip, they did an interview. So Teams, right? Getting really familiar and comfortable being on camera. I did one interview, and then that afternoon I did a second interview. The next day I did a third interview, sent some paperwork, and they sent me an offer letter. And it was a completely new line of work for me. So this was all now, instead of just focusing logistics and medical infrastructure growth, this was process improvement, business process improvement, which I now know that we did some of this in the military, but I really had no idea. I had no idea what it was all about, and I jumped in with both feet, and I absolutely love it.
Really quick, how long was the entire interview process from start to finish?
Like the duration of each interview, or from like the start until the offer letter?
Start to offer letter.
This was less than a week.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Whoa. That's
Wow.
intense.
Yeah. It's really fast. And I'm really glad you asked that, because I've seen a lot of folks have like a window, like you can't look for a job too far out, because, a lot of companies, like, they want somebody right away. So is it like, search like up to 90 days out, but be prepared for an immediate, need? It's definitely a good, something to think about that I never really did before.
And now that you're doing business process improvement, and maybe you can relate and expound upon it. So I sat through some Lean Six Sigma yellow belt training not too long ago. And it's, yellow belt's like this, it's a 1-day orientation, right? The green belt is the week-long program. And we were going through this thing, and I was like, oh, flow chart. Yeah. I've done one of those. And there was like, oh, lean principles. Well, yeah, we kind of do that, right? And then, oh, Kanban. Yeah, I've used a Kanban board before. It kind of didn't work, but I know why it didn't work. And then it worked for this other thing. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that despite not having like a green belt certification yet, I noticed that a lot of the things that they were talking about in the commercial and in U.S. industry and how they applied business process improvement and Lean Six Sigma, all of a sudden I realized, wow, we do quite a bit of that. Not saying we do it great, but I realized we do quite a bit of that. Have you noticed that? Has that something you noticed in performing in your current function or your current job?
Yeah, 100%. And I never did any of the Lean Six Sigma while I was in, but you're right. The first couple of products I looked at, I was like, oh, okay, yep, flow chart tracking, yep, org chart, got it. But yeah, in principle, absolutely it is something that a lot of us did while in the service. And then in practice, just learning the terminology that they use, and the various software programs, and that was really the learning part, not the theory of improving processes. I mean, every aspect, like you can improve process in personal, military, civilian, like anything. And for us, it's embed ourselves, learn the process if there is a process, and then capture it, right? Write it down, put it into the system, like, and actually make it flow based on what is the most logical way, and then find pain points, and then workshop it, figure out options to improve, and then propose the change, implement, do a pilot, do some surveys, see how it works, and then do full rollout implementations. So it really is fascinating. But you're right, like Lean Six Sigma, any type of agile, any safe, all those are folks are really using them, in at least in a lot of the companies that I'm in and around.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of opportunities to combine a little bit of everything, right? So traditional project management, waterfall, adopting some agile, maybe incorporating some Lean Six Sigma tools, essentially like borrowing from the project and program management tool belt that you probably developed over time. And it sounds like, and I'm fascinated too. I mean, I took my yellow belt course and I was like, wow, that's actually kind of cool. And we kind of do that. And so I'm very happy for you, because it sounds like a very neat thing that I'm certainly interested in learning more about. I did want to ask you this question before we go into how do people get into contracting? Talk a little bit about work-life balance. I think when you mentioned contracts being available through like different companies, or through the same company but different locations, or for different clients, one of the questions I have in my head is, are you moving more in the land of contracting opportunities? Is there a lot of moving required, or if they still embraced some hybrid work or telework? And then how do you mix that all into pursuing other pursuits that are outside of work that are still fulfilling?
Yeah, great point. There are a ton of hybrid opportunities, and most of the stuff I'm seeing, it's not really listed as remote, because usually they want some sort of option in there for travel. So like mine has 10% travel. I think that the last one was 10 or maybe 20% travel, but that doesn't mean that 20% of the time you're guaranteed to travel. In fact, my last one, I didn't travel once in the year and a half I was there. This one, travel at least once a quarter, but it's opportunity based. And the folks that are in the local area, they still do a hybrid, and they come in 1 to 2 days a week. They come in like every Wednesday and everything. So I used that when I was going through the interview process, and they're like, hey, where are you located? Okay, coast North Carolina. Well, we're up in DC. Are you going to be able to come up? And so, just thinking through it, I was like, hey, I'll come up for a week at a time every month. I'll give you more FaceTime, than other folks. It's just, logistically it has to make more sense at a particular time. So They were on board with that, and they appreciate the the offer to give more than they're asking. They haven't taken me up on it, but I still would. But I've also, like, I have a friend who he's on the tech side, and he's a local friend out here in North Carolina, and he was looking at a job out of Silicon Valley, and it was not listed as hybrid or remote, but he wanted to do it, so he still applied. And going through the interview process, that's when he began to barter and compromise about, hey, what are options here for travel? Can I come down for a month at some point, once a quarter, or whatever the case may be? Or can we trade off things? And that negotiation stuff, I mean, it is so important, and especially on the military retired side, because if you've got healthcare covered, you've got your insurance covered, you've got dental, or whatever the case may be, you can use those as bargaining chips when you're doing salary negotiations. Like, hey, X company, you don't have to pay me, or you don't have to provide this because I've already got it. So I would like to, opt out of that, and then you can give me a higher, salary. So, but yeah, I do see the remote opportunities kind of dwindling down, but I don't think they're going away. Like my team right now, as I said, they're based out of DC, but we've got folks in our team that are all over. And as long as we are able to go in person for, say, quarterly planning conference, or certain ceremonies or whatnot, as long as we can do that, great. And I would say that the travel is so pleasant. Nothing on DTS or any other services travel systems, but there's an app on my phone, and I request travel, and it already loads based on the zip code, the per diem, the mileage from my home location. If I'm going to drive, it takes 10 minutes to submit an authorization. It goes right to my boss. They've got the app, and they click approve, and you're good, and you travel. I mean, it's easy. And then on the backside, file your claim, and within 2 days, you're already paid.
Gosh.
Sounds nice.
That sounds nice. And I don't blame, I understand why the joint federal travel regulations are the way they are. It was that one jerk that used the government travel charge card at the place that they never should have been in the first place. And no, you can't buy extra shots for all the strangers. But man, that, it sounds good. It sounds good. So many things sound good. That sounds good.
Yes. And I'll add too, something else that is really good is performance recognition.
Mm.
Oh.
So military wise, right? Like, you could get into the meritocracy aspect, but you get an award when you change units. You get an award when you retire. There are certain awards for certain ranks within reason. You could get a good performance evaluation, but that's also slightly biased. The Marine Corps has done a very good job, and in fact, the Air Force too, about EPRs and OPRs with putting a weight on the rater. But the first time I got a monetary incentive for performance, I was blown away. They're like, "Hey, your client is very happy. They sent me an email thanking you for your hard work, for putting like some some products together in briefings and whatnot." And so my company gave me an incentive, a financial incentive, and I was taken aback. I was like, "Man, how cool is that? Like, I'll work hard, they recognize it, and I get extra money."
Yeah.
It was neat,
Mind-blowing concept.
Yeah.
Wow.
And in that same vein, the new company, when I interviewed for it, I interviewed for what I thought and what they advertised was the position of the current level that I was at. And right before they gave me the offer letter, they basically were like, "Hey, we were actually interviewing you for a promoted position. But we kind of wanted to see if we wanted to feel it out first before we even put that on the table." And so, like, they gave me a promotion with this new job, and I couldn't be happier.
That's great, man. You perform, and you're a heavy hitter, and you put in the energy and the time, and you deliver a quality service, and the customer is happy. you actually get rewarded and recognized for it. That's great.
Right.
So what else are you doing? I'm asking a rhetorical question because despite all of that, to balance out, to have a balanced life, I know that you're not just all about work, but aside from you having an insane running speed that I can't catch up with because I follow you on social media, but you're also the board member of the Surf City Board of Adjustments. Surf City Board of Adjustments. How did that happen? What's going on there?
So I'll back up just a tiny bit. I have wanted to have more free time, right? I've wanted to have more free time, but not just for me, like to do community type things. And that's hard. It's really hard. It's difficult when you're, moving around and, especially if you're in operations, you're deploying, you're a nomad, you have no home. And, Surf City, as I retired, this is now my place. And so starting with that, I wanted to be more involved in the community. So I first reached out to our HOA board and went to the first meeting. They had an opportunity on the board for a seat. And so I did my first meeting as a board member on the homeowners association. And by the end of the meeting, I was offered the president position. So I became the HOA president, which, great. It's awesome. It's really, really awesome to know that you're making a positive impact in the community that you live in. But it is definitely probably one of the most thankless jobs I can think of. But I will still gladly do it because, there's so much to be said about, caring about the place you live at. But so spending some time on that board for a little over a year now. Recently, I saw, and I keep track of all of our, community relations things and opportunities. And I saw it on Facebook on our Surf City page. They always, put the jobs that are opening, and I saw a Board of Adjustments, and I was like, man, I don't even know what that is, but it seems intriguing. So I just started Googling it, and seeing what it's about. And I was like, man, that's kind of cool. I'd like to, offer to do some of that. And so I submitted an application resume, and, they wrote me right back, and they're like, hey, we'll let you know. And then I didn't hear anything for a few weeks. So, I thought, okay, they probably just gave it to somebody actually qualified for it. And lo and behold, I got a message from them, and actually one of my friends who's on the council saying, "Hey, congrats! We just voted you in." So, yeah, I haven't actually gone to any meetings yet for it. They only meet once a month if there are current applications for adjustment. But I will be going in just to do a face-to-face and kind of meet some of the team next week. So yeah, it's exciting.
All right, dude, just help me out here because I'm over here in a corner chewing on a red crayon. I need to know, what does the Board of Adjustments do?
Yeah. Well, I'll learn more about it, as I really study the handbook. I read the handbook, but and I did a bunch of Googling. But yeah, from what I understand, it's if there's an adjustment application that somebody submits, say property or maybe like zoning or some type of change in permitting related to land management, that application has to be discussed and heard by the board. And so the board meets, discuss it, talk through the details, and then go through the approval process if applicable.
Okay, I got it. All right. Well, hey, balanced life. I think you didn't mention it. I'm not sure if you did, but I had said at the beginning, this wasn't going to be about military contracting. This is just going to be about the contracting landscape. And correct me if I'm wrong, the current client that you are serving on this contract is not military. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
Okay.
Yep. So the last one was, and this one is not.
Okay. Good to go. Well, and I think that's important because even in my mind, when I was thinking contracting, I thought military contracting, meaning when you go into the contracting world, you're going to be working for other military units, right? But it sounds like, depending on the company that you're with, It could be as broad as federal or state government agencies. It could even be private organizations that you're ending up providing a service to. So it could be rather broad. And I think it's a great point.
Yep. And some folks do multiple. The client I have right now, that they get all my time. And other folks, like there are folks on our team that they get X amount of hours per week. And then, the coworker is supporting another client. So one may be a DOD, one may be Border Patrol, one may be, some federal agency. And so sometimes they get a certain amount of time, which is also further confusing and took me a while to comprehend it, because you're salaried, but you have to count your hours, and then you have to charge your hours to the various charge codes. And so learning that whole process was something I had to wrap my mind around.
All right, good to know. Hey, sis, before we go into the closing, do you have any questions?
No, not really. It's just good to hear that you transitioned into a remote work really well, because what I keep hearing is, having to manage your schedule from going from the military and then transitioning out of the military into the civilian world and having to manage your schedule and do your own work. I can hear that people are 50-50 if it's hard or if it's actually easier than they thought. So to hear that you were able to transition into remote work and then figure out the hybrid work as well, it's really, that's great to hear.
Yeah. And I know a lot of folks like it, a lot of folks hate it. And so for me, perspective is, that I have the opportunity to commute from my bed to the office, and so it's I really enjoy it, but it's not for everybody. Absolutely not for everybody. But on a leadership side, a lot of companies are hesitant. They're like, remote workers, and that's like a dirty term sometimes. But it for anybody that has decent people skills, you can tell remote workers that are not pulling their weight. It's very, very easy to tell. And so it's, in my mind, from a leadership perspective, yeah, you could remote work all you want in certain jobs and be totally effective. In fact, I can do way more meetings from my house than I could in an office.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed on the 1 day a week that we get for telework, and I know it's crazy. I'm part of a military organization that still has a telework day, but I'll fire up my computer at 06:30. I'll be checking email at 06:40 while sipping on a cup of coffee I just made, go shower up, do the rest of it, be back on, and then I'll forget that it's like 17:45 because the sun started to set a little bit, and I'm like, oh, crud. What am I doing on this thing still? I mean, sometimes I think people can thrive in it and produce a lot of results.
Yeah, definitely. And I would add too, because I didn't really answer it before, is the balance part. I oftentimes just want to keep going and going and going, and I want more responsibility and more jobs and more involvement. But it's got to be at a spot where it's manageable, and that work-life balance, especially with remote work, can creep up. You know what I mean? Like I had to learn, get out of the operations mindset. Like you are done working at a certain time unless there's like something big going on. Like just stop, close the computer, and walk away. Don't let it suck you in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Man, this has been some great information, but we're running short on time. So, before we wrap this up, I wanted to ask you if there are 2 or 3 things that you want listeners to remember as they prepare for their own transition. What are they?
I would say one, we said in the beginning that a lot of folks say that you'll know when your time is up, but having a plan and having like a general duration or timeline that you think you're going to get out, like do that math and kind of let it marinate and talk about it with your family, and when I say do the math, like, if there's, obviously you're going to calculate your retirement, and if I stay in another 2 years, I'm going to get this and that, and, plan out all possible options. But, think about, what taxes are going to look like. What's your retirement check? When are you going to get your retirement check? Like how soon after you retire? If you think VA disability is going to be something, that all needs to go into the calculus, as well as, hey, am I going to roll out at 20 and get 50%, or am I going to stay in 30 and get 75 and maybe promote, 2 more times? and make double or whatever, the math comes out to be. But, and then am I going to lose out on potential opportunities? So just kind of having all that stuff, I think most folks do to a degree, but yeah, keep on if you do, and if you don't do that, I would say. The other thing is it'll be okay, right? Like, so for the folks that aren't like getting out like fully certified, for the folks that maybe are transitioning with maybe not exactly knowing what you're going to do, SkillBridge is great. Networking, right? Have a LinkedIn profile, keep in contact with people. It will pay dividends. And so take some of the worry and some of the angst out of the transition, and just know, like, what do they say, that the average adult has no less than 3 or so careers, whatever, I might be messing up the numbers, but that's true. And so the Marine Corps, that was, a fifth of my life. Great. You know what I mean? Like, growing up was a fifth, so I got a couple more fifths I'm gonna, go through. And so maybe I don't stay with BPI or whatever, maybe I go back to logistics or something totally new. Just having that open mind and being at ease will help your transition.
Mm.
All right, great. Hey, if listeners think of a question that we didn't ask, how can they get in touch with you, and how can people follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you my phone number and physical address.
No, please don't. Don't.
Yeah, the easiest way is LinkedIn, especially from the professional aspect. If you Google mine, or if you LinkedIn search my name, there's only 2 Sheridan Conklins in there, and you should be able to tell which one, probably just from the sound of my voice, is me. So that's the easiest way. And if not, I think you're going to link in the show notes or whatever opportunities. Reach out to me.
Well, hey, Sheridan, thank you so much for your time. This has been very informative. I'm even personally very interested in what it is that you do. So I'm taking notes, and I'm going to be thinking about this one for a little while. But hey, again, thanks for coming on, and we'll be in touch.
Fantastic. Thank you both. What a great time.
Thank you.
And Sheridan Conklin has left our virtual studio. Sis, thoughts?
It's funny. He used the word opportunities a lot in the beginning, where he wasn't finding opportunities being in the military, and then he's finding a lot of opportunities outside in the civilian world. And I think that's really great, because that just means that there's such potential for growth with the skills that you gain in the military and bringing it into the civilian world. And I think what's really awesome for him specifically is that he was able to find a company that has talent managers, or at least people in the interview process, that could really recognize those skills and shape and form a role that would benefit their company, but also benefits him for those growth opportunities. So, when you're in those interviews and people are asking you, very tough questions, and this interview process only took a week. That's insane. But when they start doing that, and they start revving up the process for you, and they ask those tough questions, that just means that they're really honing in on your skills. And so that's always a very good sign.
Tangential to that, talking about growth opportunities, I got to tell you, and this, I worked with Sheridan, and to be more specific, I was an operations officer and he was the operations assistant. And, when you do this long enough, every now and then, you'll see somebody that works for you, and you're looking at what they're capable of producing. You look at their qualities as a human being. You look at their leadership ability and their managerial skills, and you look at them and you say, like, they could be doing my job. As a matter of fact, they might even be doing my job better than me. They could do my job even better than me. And Sheridan was one of those. I'm good at what I do, and I'm pretty confident with what I do. But I'll tell you, there wasn't anybody that didn't like working with Sheridan. He had a great reputation, and he was not only a hard worker, but there were times where I'd look at what he did, and I'm like, wait, I need you to teach me. How did you do that? That was awesome. And so to hear that he's not limited by some of the arbitrary well, maybe I shouldn't say arbitrary, but some of the limitations of the promotion system within the military, and he's out there and he's crushing it. He's getting recognized for it. I think that's that's a calling message for those that know that it's their time. Also know that some of the benefits out there are, if you don't like the job that you have in the civilian world, you're not adherent to, unless you sign one, you're not adherent to an enlistment contract or, end of obligated service requirement. You can move on and you can find a place where you can be at peak performance, flourish, and crush. And I think that is a great lesson and a good story about how a Marine retired and found a place where he could just crush.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Love that for him.
So that's it. It wraps up another great conversation. And if you're listening to me right now, thank you very much for listening. If you like what you heard, please consider, if you're on Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star review. If you're listening to this on Spotify or another platform, hey, drop us a comment. We'll take the good, the bad, the ugly, because even here we are about process improvement and we will take what you have to say to heart. If you know somebody that may be thinking about going into the contracting world, hey, share the episode with them. You can send them the link. You can share them on any of the other platforms. If you want to get in touch with us, you can hit us up on our Instagram account, New Mission Charlie Tango. That's New Mission CT, Charlie Tango. We'd love to hear your feedback. You can drop us a DM or you could send us an email at newmissionct@gmail.com and we will get back to you as soon as we can. If you're preparing for your own transition, well, know that I'm right there with you. So until next time, stay focused.